We're an hour away from President Trump's address to the nation. The subject, he says, is election security. The question is, will he bring facts, real facts, to go with the really big news he says he's got? John King here, in for Anderson. That's one question. The other is, which election will the president most be focused on? The ones yet to come or the one he lost? We're going to be watching and listening to what he says tonight, and we will bring you any breaking news ASAP. But we are not going to take the president's speech live. That's because of this president's history of misleading and, in some cases, false statements on the subject of elections and election integrity. Also because the White House earlier today said he'll be showing newly declassified documents, and we want to make sure we have time to review them, to contextualize whatever he says or shows before airing it. One thing is clear. Ever since announcing this speech on Monday, he's been making big promises about tonight's speech. And today at the White House, so did his press secretary.
It will shock you if you have an honest eye listening to the president tonight, and everything he is saying will be backed by facts and by evidence that will be provided this evening.
She would not say what specifically he'll be talking about, but CNN has learned from other sources the president intends to reveal what he will claim is brand new information about foreign efforts to influence U.S. elections, including from China. He's also expected to discuss claimed vulnerabilities in election infrastructure, including voting machines. All of this, if true, and especially if ongoing, certainly could be useful to know. We're now 16 weeks away, a little less than that, from Election Day. But will that be all? It's a valid question because of a pattern of looking back over the years, and including more recently. This is just from the past 6 weeks.
The rigged elections. They rigged the election. These elections are rigged. They had a rigged election, and I wasn't here. Totally rigged election. We had a rigged election. We have a lot of rigged elections. It was a rigged election. It was rigged, just like the election was rigged in 2020. It was a rigged election.
Just to state the very obvious, there's no evidence, zero, the 2020 election was rigged. Multiple recounts in Georgia, overseen by a Republican Secretary of State and election chief, backed that up. A Republican-sponsored vote audit in Arizona, commissioned by the state's Republican-controlled Senate, backed that up. 60-some court cases, including in front of some Trump-appointed judges, backed that up. So did the president's own attorney general.
I had 3 discussions with the president that I can recall. One was on November 23rd, one was on December 1st, and one was on December 14th. And I've been through sort of the give and take of those discussions. And in that context, I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was
We bleeped that, but I think you got it at home. BS was what the then Attorney General said. We will know soon enough if tonight is forward-looking or not. One last observation before a discussion with some experts who know this topic cold. The issue of foreign meddling or interfering is a big and legitimate one, and we are told China is a big focus for the president tonight. And the intelligence community has warned before that China is aggressively trying to gather information about U.S. voter rolls and about U.S. election practices. Nothing in those past warnings, though, has suggested China was able in any way to influence the outcome of an election. Let's start off our important coverage tonight with our chief White House correspondent and, of course, anchor of The Source, Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, what more are White House officials saying? What are your sources telling you about the president's focus tonight?
Well, John, they're arguing that what you hear from the president tonight will be backed up by evidence of what exactly it is that he's arguing. And we do know that that is expected to include documents that they have declassified. Beyond that, it still remains to be seen what exactly the president himself is going to lay out. And also, you know, John, as well as I do in these situations, the president also has a habit of going off script. And we know very well how he feels about elections and how he feels in particular about the 2020 election, which is that he repeatedly has argued without any basis that it was rigged and that he did not actually lose that election to Joe Biden. And so we'll see if he makes that argument in a similar vein tonight with these documents that he is expected to declassify, and especially to see what he says about China, because obviously that would be notable given the Chinese leader is expected to visit Washington in just a few months from now after the president himself was there last year. And so one thing, though, in terms of looking at this in the broader picture of what the White House is unveiling based on also the president's history of lying about elections and not producing any evidence to back up what he's arguing, was a question I asked the press secretary today, which is if there's evidence of widespread fraud or interfering in these elections, are there going to be charges that follow? And this is what Caroline Leavitt told me.
Thank you, Caroline. Sure. Regarding the president's speech tonight, he's been in office over 540 days now. If what he says is tonight is backed up by evidence, why hasn't anyone been charged?
Well, he hasn't revealed it yet. He hasn't declassified the documents yet, and you will see what he says tonight, and then we'll move forward appropriately from there.
Tonight from the Justice Department?
I don't speak on behalf of the Justice Department, Caitlin. You know that. Rachel,
By evidence, will there be charges?
you'll have to ask the Justice Department. I don't charge people. I just speak on behalf of the president.
So obviously, we'll see what follows the president's speech tonight. We do expect him to be joined potentially by some officials during these remarks tonight, or at least they're expected to also issue similar statements backing up what we hear from the president tonight. He's someone who's long been skeptical of the intelligence community, but of course, right now it is being run by a loyalist of his. That's Bill Pulte, who's also a top federal housing official for the president. And so we'll obviously wait to see what exactly it is the president himself says tonight. But this is a primetime address. It's often, as you know, John, who covered the White House, it's something that the president rarely does, and only for matters that are of the utmost importance. But it also comes as the president has been pushing the Save America Act, this act that does not have enough Republican votes on Capitol Hill. And it's something that he's been pushing more and more as we get closer and closer to the midterm elections. And I would expect that this is going to be used as a vehicle to once again push for that, even though it has not yet shifted Republican minds, at least enough for the votes to happen for it to pass so far, John.
So far. Caitlin Collins, we'll see what the president has to say. And of course, we'll see you at the top of the hour, at the beginning for The Source at the top of the next hour. Caitlin, thanks so much. Joining us now to discuss the former Deputy Director of National Intelligence, Beth Sanner, the former FBI Deputy Director, Andrew McCabe, and the former CIA Chief of Station in Beijing, Randall Phillips. Beth, I want to start with you because of the three experts I have before me here. You were still in government at this time. You were including your duties of sometimes briefing the president at this time. Are you aware? I don't want you to break the rules. I don't want you to share the facts of any intelligence, but are you aware of any classified documents at the time that could be declassified tonight that you believe would shed new, important, relevant information about foreign interference in the 2020 election?
So the key word there that you just spoke was interference, right? And so the intelligence community really divides up foreign adversary activities against our elections into two categories: influence, and most famously, we talk about Russia influence efforts, but we had Iran doing the same, right? Trying to change the actions or views of voters. But interference means that adversaries have gotten inside our systems and are altering the process of voting, either altering registration data, who's voting, altering vote tabulation, altering the counting and the reporting, right? So we have never in the intelligence community seen any indication that an adversary has done that latter, interference, actually getting in the system and changing things. I would be surprised if there was information like that. But as I've said before, when you have a group of people who are not full-time intelligence analysts looking through raw intelligence reporting, so not analyzed by people who are deep on the subject, you do have a risk of someone finding a piece of evidence and waving it around. This happened in the Iraq context. It happened before, and almost always you can find one piece of reporting that says, Elvis killed JFK, but that doesn't mean it's true.
It's an important point, Andrew, because let's go through. This has been studied and studied and studied and studied. And the U.S. intelligence community did say in a post-2020 election assessment, quote, "We have no indications that any foreign actor attempted to alter any technical aspect of the voting process in the 2020 U.S. elections, including voter registration, casting ballots, vote tabulation, or reporting results." So that there backs up what Beth says. No, yes, they meddle. Yes, they influence. Yes, China's trying to gather information about everything, about our credit cards, about our voting rolls, about everything we have. We know that to be a fact. But to the idea that the president says he has his people, his intelligence people have told him they have the new wow evidence. Do you believe it exists, or do you think it's more Beth's point, somebody like a Bill Pulte, who's a housing guy, but now he's suddenly the director of national intelligence, found one or two pieces of paper, maybe uncorroborated, and says, "Here you go, sir"?
John, it's almost incomprehensible to me that this exists. I mean, in very early 2021, Donald Trump's then director of national intelligence, John Ratcliffe, who is now running the CIA for Donald Trump, stated in a report conclusively what you just said. There was no indication of interference, as Beth has defined it so ably for us, interference in the 2020 election. The closest we've ever come to that was 2016, when the Russians probed the voter rolls of nearly all 50 states and actually got into a database in Illinois and was able to view voter records, but never actually impacted any of them, never changed or destroyed or edited or deleted any of those voter records. That's as close as anyone has ever come. Now, in 2020, we know that the Chinese attempted to influence U.S. perceptions about the election. That sort of thing has been happening wholesale since 2016, when the Russians did it. And then, of course, in 2020, the Chinese did it. That's using communication and social media, and sometimes social media bots and all sorts of technology to get information out into the population to try to influence people's perspectives and their preferences for candidates. But that is not the same thing as breaking into voting machines and messing with the tabulation. We know that Iran tried to do that in 2020 and were determined to be unsuccessful. So if they've come up with something now, they're going to need to explain why their own people saw it the opposite way in the immediate aftermath of 2020.
And Randall, the White House aides tell us there will be a big focus on China tonight. That's your wheelhouse. What do you know? What do the Chinese try to change votes? Do they try to change and influence our elections? Or are they just trolling for information they think is valuable to them in some other way?
Well, I think as Beth and Andy just said, they've never been seen to be trying to interfere. But to influence, yes. And certainly this is nothing new. It's been going on for the last 25 to 30 years, where they use their resources, and they're considerable, to learn more about the candidates and the people around them and what interests them, how they view China, what it is that they may do once in office. And then also the intelligence agencies of China will look at that as to see if they can find some vulnerabilities in some of the people in and around the candidate or either candidate. And so I think, yes, they are very active on the cyber side. They're very active on the human side. But have they interfered? No. Have they tried to influence, particularly, frankly, let's look at the whole debate around TikTok before. They had a very powerful tool there of 150 million Americans on TikTok. And that would certainly be an avenue to try to influence, but interfere, no.
So, Beth, again, the test for the president today is, it's like I call it, and I don't mean to be flippant, but the Jerry Maguire moment, show me the money, in the sense that he said this so many times that if he wants to say it again, we need to see evidence, right? You were there again during 2020. These are some of your colleagues in the administration at the time. John Ratcliffe, as you noted, was the director of national intelligence. Gina Haspel, a pro, was the head of the CIA. Chris Wray was director of the FBI. Bill Barr was the attorney general. Marco Rubio, now the secretary of state, was chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Not just running up to the election, but in all the time after the election, before the Biden inauguration, when they were trying to stay in power, when they were looking for evidence to overthrow the results of the election and to challenge the election and to prove their case, which they could not prove, of fraud or rigging, wouldn't those people I just mentioned, pretty talented people, if there was evidence of this somewhere in the U.S. intelligence system, they're trying to say at the White House, this didn't get to the president. Is that feasible?
It's, no, not really. I mean, certainly, again, if you're talking about a handful of reports, if they weren't deemed credible, or if it is what we actually reported, which was that they had accessed some voter rolls in terms of their public opinion research, and they were very interested in collecting everything. I mean, they have hoovered up information about every American. So why would that stop or be different? And why would they be disinterested in our political environment? Of course, they have a lot of skin in the game. So the question here isn't about whether China is good or bad. They are bad actors. They are trying to, manipulate things in their favor. But I would be very, very surprised if they come up with evidence that shows that they were involved in altering the election system, and particularly what people need to listen for, would any of these activities have changed the outcome? There are multiple steps here, John, and getting to a point where we actually said, wow, that changed so many votes that the election would have come out differently. And in 2016, that didn't happen either.
Right. Andrew, I'm going to give the president the benefit of the doubt for a minute and say he more looks forward and says there's this foreign meddling, and maybe he should have talked about it more in the past, but now he thinks it's a big deal and the government should do something about it. That would be a good thing, actually. You've all made the case pretty clearly that there are bad actors at least playing around in our elections and trying with some nefarious goals. The president's going to push the Congress to pass a bill called the SAVE Act. There aren't the votes in the Senate. That bill would require documentation about citizenship. It would cut back on online voter registration, cut back significantly on mail-in voter registration. Would those steps stop the foreign interference, or is the government, are there other things the government should be doing?
Those steps will not stop foreign interference. Those steps, are directed at what's happening here in the United States, how people register, how they physically vote, what sort of identity documents they have to show to do those things. What we're led to believe so far, and we haven't heard the speech yet, but what we're led to believe is it is something based on foreign intelligence, that is intelligence collected by the CIA, the NSA, or other entities. So likely what's coming up here is a story about foreign meddling, and maybe a concern about foreign meddling in the future. If that's the case, the solution to that sort of activity, the way you address that threat, is by standing up more robust systems and teams of individuals and experts here in the intelligence community to collect better intelligence overseas. That's what the agency does. That's what NSA does. FBI does that to a lesser degree here in the United States in their counterintelligence role. Actually, what's happened to date is the opposite of that, right? So the Election Assistance Committee, which is responsible for funneling resources to the states to help them do that work, to bolster the safety of their systems, was just obliterated by President Trump about a week ago. He fired all the members of the commission. So now that's no longer a functioning entity. He's undermined the resources and the ability for CISA, part of DHS, has done so much to secure election security in the last few years. CISA is really like, they're trying to walk on one leg at this point. So we've gone, if we're worried about what's happening overseas, we've been going in the opposite direction, unfortunately, in the last year and a half.
Well, again, about 45 minutes away from the president. We will see if he changes that narrative and see what documents he actually brings forward. Beth Santa, Andrew McCabe, Randall Phillips, grateful for your time and insights tonight. Thank you. Up next for us, why some social media posts by the president are being called an ethics disaster by someone who used to work in his administration.